Welcome back, everybody. Well, what's next for Benghazi terror suspect Ahmed Abu Khatalla, who remains on the USS New York following his capture last week in Libya? Taking him back to the U.S. by sea rather than air gives investigators lots of time to question him before he lawyers up. Once he arrives here, he will be heading to a federal trial. Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. He's joining us now to weigh in on what happens to Khatalla. Welcome. Great to have you here, sir.
It's good to be with you.
You know, the Obama administration wants him tried rather quickly in federal court and says prosecuting terror suspects in a civilian court has a nearly 100% conviction rate, a position that's at odds with GOP critics who say postpone the criminal prosecution so that interrogators have time to get valuable intel and ultimately try him in a military court. What say you?
Well, you know, under the Bush administration, we had two priorities. The first priority was prevention, which meant that we needed information, and so the interrogation of people that we detained was something that was very important. And the second priority was, of course, prosecution, bringing someone to justice. In this particular case, this president apparently has made the decision that this individual is going to be brought to justice in our criminal courts. And you're right, it appears that they're taking advantage of the way they're transporting him by sea to ask him questions. Arguably, you can make the argument that he's being detained by the military and therefore is not in custodial. It's not subject to custodial interrogation. But you know, again, I think the president appears to want it both ways. He wants to say we're bringing someone to justice in our criminal courts because they're the best in the world, and they truly are. And yet he appears to be taking advantage of this transport method in order to question him without, I suspect, reading him his Miranda rights.
Interesting. You know, what about the fact that there are folks who really want to push to get him to trial quickly? The group called Human Rights Watch, for example, says the U.S. is obligated under international law to provide him due process protections and a fair trial. Libya is calling Khatalla's capture a kidnapping. What are the political ramifications when you're dealing with the highly charged backdrop of an attack on our consulate where 4 Americans died?
Well, I mean, I would not. I would never make apologies for our system of justice, which I think is the fairest in the world. And obviously, the way that we deal with a captured terrorist is going to have ramifications around the world. People are going to be watching very closely how we deal with this particular individual. And there may be long-term ramifications in terms of how someone may reciprocate when they capture an American citizen. So it's something that we are going to be worried about. But again, our system of justice, in my judgment, whether it's military commissions, whether we detain them indefinitely at Guantanamo, all are consistent with the rule of law, as are our criminal trials and our criminal justice system.
I want to switch gears for a moment, if I could, and talk to you about the military teams going into Iraq. We did not get a status of forces agreement with Iraq. So what about legal protections for the military advisory teams that are going to be embedded with Iraqi forces?
I would worry about that, quite honestly. The status of forces agreement is something that's very, very important for our military. We do not want our soldiers in any capacity, because things happen, unexpected events occur, and someone may be subject to accusations of breaking Iraqi law. And so it's very important that we have a clear understanding of what legal rights and obligations exist with respect to these individuals, no matter whether or not they're advisors, no matter if they're there on a combat role. And so from my perspective, this is a very, very important agreement that we need to have in place.
Isn't it true that these legal protections are really aimed to ensure that the U.S. troops will be subject to the U.S. military system of justice if needed and not to the Iraqi judicial system?
Well, again, the key is if someone engages in conduct that is improper, they are going to be brought to justice. But we want to do it so under our system of justice, which, as I said earlier, is the fairest in the world. And so it's not a question of our soldiers being over in Iraq doing something and then escaping, you know, any kind of culpability. This is about making sure that we have due process protections in place for our soldiers when they are in a combat role or an advisory role in another country.
But what happens, though, if our folks get caught up in a situation where they're forced to defend themselves and there may be collateral damage with innocent people caught in the crossfire who are hurt or killed? What protection should be in place for our troops who are there, even if they're there in a limited role?
Well, again, it will depend upon the status of forces agreement that we do have in place. But of course, you're always allowed to defend yourself. There's always a right of self-defense. But we don't want it. What we want to do is have that discussion within our own military system or within our own criminal justice system in terms of, was this a proper use of force? Was this a proper situation of self-defense? But clearly, if you're over there and your life is in danger, your buddy's life is in danger, you're allowed to defend yourself. But to the extent there's any kind of disagreement about that, or we have to defend that kind of action, we want to do so under procedures that we're very familiar with, and again, which I think, in my judgment, remain the fairest in the world.
And we are being told that they're going to get some type of written assurances from the Iraqi government about these particular forces, but we have yet to hear exactly what type of assurances that's been in place. So a lot remains unknown at this time, sir.
Well, no question about it. And I do think, I've listened to some of your previous speakers, I do believe this is something that's very, very important. I don't know if it's as simple as, signing a piece of document and sending over the facts. There's a reason why we couldn't reach a status of forces agreement in the past, because these can be very technical, very difficult, very complex. And so hopefully this is something that we can work through. But it remains to be seen how long it's going to take.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you, as always, for joining us with your insights. Really appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Good to be with you.